Your sales team isn't prospecting. You've tried incentives, public recognition, you've run competitions, you've done everything you can, but somehow you can't get them to just pick up the phone and call a prospect to book a meeting. All you can hear is the sound of keyboards. You're checking a dashboard and all you can see is the number of emails being sent just skyrocketing, but the number of calls is just staying flat. What's very frustrating for you, and it has been frustrating for me, is that you could be making more money, you could be exploding revenue quotas, and your salespeople could be making more money, more commissions, exceed quota if only they were prospecting, but somehow they just don't. But first, to solve an issue, we need to perfectly define what is the real problem. Problem number one is that when you're hiring account executives and you tell them if they own the full cycle from prospecting to closing, the problem is that you're asking them to be great at about 5 jobs, and a lot of these jobs around prospecting are really hard to do. I've been in their shoes. I've been an account executive. I know what it's like. You're managing 70, 80 clients, you're driving up sales, you've got internal meetings, you are juggling pilots, them confirmations, negotiations, you're trying to push deals before the end of the quarter. So prospecting gets pushed aside. The second problem is that everything's cyclical. I've talked to a lot of companies and they all tell me the same thing. The team would prospect really hard, let's say January, February, and then deals would come in 6 or 9 months later because that's the time to sell. And once you get to 6 or 9 months later and they've closed all the deals, suddenly they find themselves without pipeline because in March, April, and May, they didn't prospect. They were too busy selling. End of the year, they ended up with dried pipelines. A lot of companies are trying to have a consistent year. And what happens is that they just can't because they're either prospecting or selling, but they're not doing both at the same time. The other issue I see is that a lot of account executives have just given up on prospecting. They're sitting and waiting for marketing to do their job or SDRs to bring them leads, but they're not very proactive. For me, it's also a cultural problem. Changing a culture is really hard when somebody doesn't have a habit of cold calling at all. What I found is really happening is that across the profession, Salesforce has measured that around 30% of the salespeople time is actually spent selling. So 3 solutions. Number 1 is switching from an account executive full cycle model to an SDR plus account executive model. You separate prospecting from closing. You get SDRs who only do prospecting and you get account executive who only close deals. The SDRs are hired and trained specifically to cold call a lot and to do a few cold emailing and cold LinkedIn as a support to the cold calling. An account executive can focus on closing deals, but also the base strategic accounts that you want to break into, maybe 20 accounts, maybe 50 accounts, which they will prospect on a regular basis. But you're not asking them to do the kind of volume that you can ask your SDR to do at enterprise level or SMB level. But before you implement this solution, you need to run the math. When I'm being brought in with my agency to run this model for companies, I always ask them about the average deal size, the time to sell, determine the unit economics, because you're basically putting more cost into the lead generation. And for this to work, you need to make sure that you get enough qualified meetings that turn into pipeline, that turn into revenue to pay for the SDR salary and the account executive salary. So you need to know first how much your SDR is going to cost. Number 2, you need to know your minimum viable output. And this is run by checking the unit economics. I've got a calculator to do it. If you're interested, just check a link in the description so you can run your own calculation. It's a very simple model where you input a few numbers and you get your ROI on cash and on revenue being spit out by the calculator. You need to know your minimum. A lot of companies, they set arbitrarily that they need 20 meetings in a month or 10 meetings in a week. But actually I found that more often than not, for the kind of ticket they sell, they might need 4 to 5 meetings per month maximum. And then if you get into the 8, 10, 12 qualified meetings mark, this is more aspirational and this is more compounded accelerated growth. So let's do the math. Let's imagine you have one SDR and this SDR generates about 10 qualified opportunities per month. That's 120 opportunities per year. And your account executive closes 25% of his opportunities into a deal closed. That gives you about 30 deals per year. And let's say for these 30 deals that your average deal size is 50 grand, then that gives you 1.5 million a year in new revenue added from the SDR efforts. Let's say your SDR costs you 70 grand per year, you're getting an ROI of 21x. Now, these are theories. You might close only 10% of qualified ups, you might close 5% of qualified ups, you might close 20%. You might actually have less qualified ups being created by your SDRs. So you need to run the numbers back and forward and understand where are the breaking points for you to start making money versus losing money, and where are the bottlenecks that you need to solve. In my opinion, this model works best if you have a high product, and it works least when you have a very low ticket product. I personally wouldn't run anything outbound for tickets of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a year. But when your deal size exceeds 10K a year, that's where it starts to get interesting to look at this model and have SDRs and account executives run together. I've been asked by companies, what if we've got plenty of products and some of them are low ticket, some of them are high ticket? I always tell them the same thing. Look at the client lifetime value. Look at the clients that maybe bought small products but have a potential to buy big ones after. And then use your SDRs to prospect lookalike accounts. But don't go for accounts that will never purchase from you anything significant, because then you're losing money on the client acquisition. Solution number 2, it was a really good one that's not from me, but I learned from my days in cybersecurity. It's called pipeline generation days. How you can imagine it is that you get the entire company to prospect during that day. They block their calendars so that they have absolutely no meeting that day, whether it's clients or internal meetings. And the entire day is dedicated to cold calling and to getting meetings. You can turn into a contest with points. The winner wins maybe a bottle of champagne or something. And it's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, only prospecting allowed. 5 p.m. is a cut. You could also run it throughout half a day. Just a good way to get the energy up and to get everybody into prospecting mode. Side effects might include your CEO going to you and asking, why the hell isn't it always like this? Now, here's why it works. It removes any all excuses. It creates a rhythm and people feed off each other's energy. That really helps when everybody's calling. Leadership should probably participate. Sales engineers should participate. Number 3 is probably the hardest, but I've seen it being the most efficient, is change your hiring profile. When I started Profitable, I already decided we were a phone-first company. We're going to prospect through the phone first and foremost. And when we measured results across the board, we saw that even when we did great email campaigns and great LinkedIn sequences, phone was still 80% of our results. Is that human connection that you just can't replicate through other channels that really made the difference for us. Here's the problem. It's really hard to make someone prospect and cold call on a regular basis if it's not already something they naturally gravitate to. I've hired people where during the interview process, I was extremely clear that we were a company that prospects. I've hired account executives who are selling on behalf of our clients. And I've told them, this is not a job where you wait for leads to come in and you whip your SDR and you blame marketing. This is a job where if you don't have pipeline, you have to prospect until you have pipeline. And then it's obviously tolerated that you spend less time prospecting, but you should still have a few hours a week of prospecting booked. And we're going to put an SDR to help you, but it's not his or her responsibility to make you successful. We've had people quit after a few weeks with us because this was a very strict rule, but I enforced. And they would say, during the interview, you didn't tell me it would be like this. And I was like, yeah, I did, because that's literally every interview I have. I ask about that. That's the most important thing. I checked for culture fit. And I have noticed that there comes a time where there are two cultures in the company. And you need to very much watch over it. Meaning, if you have a culture of people playing the blame game and they are not prospecting and they're always finding excuses not to. And on the other side, you've got, let's say, half the team or more than half the team who are prospecting, who are hard charging and doing the work and not searching for excuses. If you give a pass to the ones that don't, you are sending the message to the ones that do, that the culture of the company is to tolerate these behaviors. Then either top performers would start leaving, or they would start slacking off and being like, what is it for anyway if what's rewarded is doing the minimum, right? And so people that didn't fit that culture just find another environment where the culture is different, where they might get tons of leads from marketing and they can spend their life warm calling leads that have been generated by marketing. And that's fine. I think there is a place for everybody. And a lot of people just don't belong in outbound teams. With that being said, how can you maybe change your culture? In my opinion, it's really hard. I probably could look at creating a culture within the culture. So creating a dedicated outbound team that or hires from scratch and isolating them as much as possible from the rest of the teams and run your experiment with them. You can hire an agency like ours to complement what you guys are doing. But again, I think to either change behaviors or hire people who will have the right behavior, I think it's just slow and costly to do it. And so I don't have a silver bullet for this. I'm just very aware that if you have a culture of people who don't cold call in the first place, it's going to be really hard to change. And it's probably going to be changed over time through hiring the right people, letting the wrong people go, and giving a chance to everybody to change how they operate. So 3 solutions. Number 1, go from a full cycle model to a SDR plus account executive model. Number 2 is pipeline generation days. It's more of a way to push people to do a little bit of prospecting. I've seen it work in 2 companies. It can probably work for you. Number 3 is the cultural transformation. I've never done it personally. I've been meeting with chief revenue officers of different companies in fintech who walked me through the difficulties to get the team to outbound and the necessity to hire new people to solve this, who walked me through a change in culture that they were creating. And it's been really hard, and it's been simply either people change behaviors and they help them the best they can, or they leave the company toward a better fit and they would hire proactively new talents. If you're curious if the plus account executive model is something that would fit your need, I encourage you to try the calculator that I've linked in the description to see if that works. If you have some difficulties with it, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or through our website, and I will make sure to walk you through it and to determine if it's the right fit or not. All right, that's it for this video. If you like it, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this one. See you in the next video.